Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well and that you're keeping lovely and warm wherever you are, because obviously it's getting a lot colder out there now. So don't forget to get a piping hot cup of cocoa. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Jeanette flicked through the white diary of her appointment book. It looked to be a hectically busy day as usual in her hair studio in Seattle. It was chock-a-block full. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, looking at the eager, hopeful young woman standing behind the reception counter. "I don't have any spare slots today, I'm afraid, but I could fit you in tomorrow at 10 if you like. It's the best I can do." "That'll be fine," said the young woman, looking very impressed. "Are you always this busy?" Jeanette sighed. "Oh, I'm afraid so. Gone are the days we can hang around hoping for a client to drop in. Now we're always hectically rushed off our feet, burning the candle at both ends." "You sound as if you wish that weren't the case," said the young lady, looking bewildered. "Most people would kill to be that busy, surely." Jeanette paused for a moment. "Oh, don't get me wrong. I appreciate being rushed off my feet, I really do. But sometimes I just wish I could breathe. You know, take a long break." "Oh, I do understand what you mean," said the woman. Jeanette was about to take the young woman's details in her appointment book when the phone rang. "Do you mind if I take this for a moment?" she said. "I won't be long." No, please go ahead." "Hello, Epiphanies, can I help you?" "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that, Joyce. I hope you're feeling better soon. Well, make sure you keep yourself lovely and warm. Honey and lemon is the idea." "Yes. Well, I'll see you next week then. Bye, dear. Take care." Jeanette looked at the young lady. "It's your lucky day today. You go and take a seat over there. I've just had a cancellation this very minute from a sick client of mine." "Are you sure?" said the young woman, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. "I mean, you were saying you needed some free time." "Oh, I'm sure," said Jeanette. "I'd be delighted to do your hair for you." Jeanette had been running her illustrious, well-established hair salon in Seattle for over 10 long years. She had wanted to be a professional hairdresser since she was a little girl, as she adored playing with people's hair. Even when she was little, she'd stand on a stool in the living room behind the large upholstered chair where her father would regularly sit reading a novel. She would twist, braid, and pull her father's hair while he continued to read. It would seem her father enjoyed having his hair played with, claiming it was like having a relaxing, somewhat vigorous head massage. Sometimes her father would discover that his short brown hair had become a mass of thousands of tiny braids. One day he slept in those braids, and when he pulled them out the following morning, his hair looked so crinkled, but in a strange way it rather suited him. After her beloved father had died prematurely from a heart attack, something that had ripped the floor out of Jeanette's world, tearing her life apart into thousands of pieces, like a displaced, warped jigsaw puzzle that was impossible to bring back together. Growing up with a single dad was all she'd ever known, as her mother never wanted to be involved in her life. When Jeanette was 2 years old, her mother had willfully abandoned the two of them, claiming she didn't want to be burdened with responsibilities. Jeanette's father had left her a sizable inheritance, and in honour of her father she'd started up her own hair salon. She now had 10 busy hairdressers working in the salon, which was a pristine square shape with white-tiled floors, soft pink emulsion walls, fluffy pink towels and a pink awning outside the hair studio. In the beginning, as with any new business, times had been exceedingly hard. At one time she was almost certain she'd have to close her doors, throw in the trowel and give up on her dream. And then voila, within weeks her hairdresser was doing a booming trade. One thing Jeanette had not been prepared for was just how incredibly exhausting her job would invariably become. She knew sooner or later she'd need to take some valuable time off. After all, she reminded herself, I don't live to work, I work to live. So what are we going to do for you today? She asked the young woman. My name's Alice, she said. Well, what are we going to do for you today, Alice? Jeanette pulled away her blonde hair, lifting it up in her hands. Your hair is too long for your face, she said. You've got a really cute little pixie face, and a short cut would really show it off beautifully in my opinion. You know what? You're drowned by your hair. You should show your face off more. Go for it, said Alice. You seem to know what you're doing. I also fancy a change. Are you sure about that? People can get very attached to long hair, you know. I'm very sure. I trust you. Jeanette got to work with her scissors while Alice was busying herself on her cell phone. Damn, she said as she looked at the phone. Everything all right? Asked Jeanette. Not really, said the young woman. I've only just got a cancellation on the cottage. I was looking forward to the cash it would bring in for me. I let it out, you see. Oh, I see. A nice little money earner for you, is it? Well, whereabouts is this cottage of yours? Asked Jeanette, in a nonchalant way, as she continued to manoeuvre her dexterous hands skillfully through blonde hair, as large chunks of it fell haphazardly onto the white-tiled floor. It's about an hour and a half's drive out of Seattle, not too far from here. You should give me your details. When I finally get a chance to let my hair down, I wouldn't mind a little break in the country. It would do me good. I'm not sure this would be your thing. The cottage is haunted. Jeanette immediately stopped cutting Alice's hair. She could feel her heart pounding with excitement. She was fascinated with all things paranormal. After her father's death, Jeanette wanted to believe with all her heart that this was not all there was, so her interest in the world of ghosts and disembodied voices had increased exponentially. For her it was almost verification, if you like, that the soul never dies, which would mean one day she would definitely be reunited with her father. Haunted, did you say? That's right. But how do you know it's haunted? Because I've stayed there and seen things. Other people who've stayed there have seen things too. That's why I got the idea to let it out to ghost enthusiasts and paranormal researchers. They're always satisfied when they stay there. The two girls who were booking the place for the weekend are very big ghost enthusiasts. They're eager to stay at the cottage. They wanted to take some video footage, but they've cancelled. Yes, they've cancelled. A real bummer. Apparently one of the girls has taken ill. Well, I'll take it then, said Jeanette, for the weekend. This time Alice looked rather bewildered. But you're busy. You'll run off your feet here at the salon. I don't care. I'll make a plan. I really could do with a weekend's break. You don't mind staying in a haunted place? Are you kidding? That's the reason I'm renting your cottage from you. Well, what do you think? Asked Jeanette, swivelling around the chair, showing Alice her zooty new haircut. The girl gasped. Oh my God! It's gorgeous! I love it! Oh my word, I never imagined I'd look this good with short hair. It looks amazing. I knew you'd like it, said Jeanette, looking pleased. Did I not say you would look fabulous with short hair? It shows off your cute little face. Alice opened her purse and handed Jeanette some keys and a map. These are for the cottage, she explained. I do hope you have a good time. I hope you know what you're getting into. It was early on a Saturday morning that Jeanette and her boyfriend Steve got into the truck to drive to Alice's cottage. Jeanette decided to say nothing to her boyfriend about the cottage being potentially haunted, as Steve did not believe in the paranormal. He was a huge cynic about things that go bump in the night. So Jeanette decided against telling him that the cottage was often let out to ghost enthusiasts and paranormal researchers, as she was certain such a revelation would go down like a lead balloon with her boyfriend, and invite a lot of scathing, sarcastic commentary and criticism. The best way to deal with a hardened cynic, she told herself, is to bring him into the eye of the storm, to say absolutely nothing. Jeanette had been going out with Steve on and off for over 8 years now. Theirs had been a rocky, tumultuous and turbulent relationship that, much like the Titanic, seemed to keep hitting icebergs, throwing them through bad, slippery patches which would cause them to part their ways. And then, for some bizarre, incredulous reason, they'd end up making up again. Jeanette believed if she and Steve ever tied the knot permanently, they would be divorced within the first year. For while she loved Steve, stability and security were not words that were ingratiated with their relationship long term. Steve was certainly not the man she'd end up marrying. She knew that in her heart, but he was still one of her very best friends, and she did love him dearly. Jeanette herself would not describe herself as a believer in ghosts, but put it this way, she wanted to believe. She seriously hoped that this weekend she'd get to see something. But the tragic thing about life that she knew only too well is that there are no guarantees in anything. It had been difficult at the last minute to find a hairdresser to replace her hair appointments at the salon for Saturday's bookings, but somehow, against all odds, she managed to find a fill-in replacement for her. She reflected about the serendipitous, fortuitous events that had transpired so seamlessly to enable her to spend the weekend at Alice's cottage. It hadn't come cheap, even with the 20% discount, so she certainly hoped it would be a weekend that they would not forget in a hurry. But she need not have worried about that, for this weekend would leave an eternal, indelible mark on her life that would never ever be erased, and would leave a lasting impression. "So where's this place?" asked Steve, as they began to drive down some rural country roads, while his GPS had developed a mind all of its own. It wasn't operating properly. It kept making a strange whirling sound. So Jeanette pulled up the map and instructed Steve exactly where to go. "I think you go right down this road, that's right, and then a swift left, and then we can look for a sign that reads Fairweather Farm. We drive through the farm gates. There's a separate cobbled road that leads to Wisteria Cottage. That's where we're going." "Righty-o," said Steve. The truck wobbled down the rough roads, causing it to jolt so precariously, so that Jeanette felt as if she was sitting on a dodgy fairground ride. The truck's thick rubber tyres lifted up large sheets of fine sand, like an earthen sandstorm, while tiny little pebbles began bouncing up into the air and splashing against the truck with these little pinging sounds. The relatively high embankments on both sides of the road consisted of short stretches of long grassy turf strewn with rocky outcrops that branched out into segregated flowery meadows pinned in by white picket fencing, one where black and white dappled cows were grazing happily, and the other where bay and black horses were seen frolicking. There were bright green ponderosa pines and Douglas firs scattered liberally across the landscape, while in the furthest distance you could see the rise and fall of the mountains. Their sturdy, solid forms seemed so ethereal and light, as if their silhouettes had been painted onto the landscape by an artist's brush in soft blues, pinks and purples, while the sky on this perfect day was the most delightful shade of blue, without a white, fluffy single cloud in sight. But then let's not kid. In this part of the world the weather was as fickle as a cheating partner, so even if the weather looked promising, it was notoriously unreliable. Jeanette had learnt this over the years, never to get her hopes up, as it could always change in a heartbeat. "Oh, here we are," she said. "This must be the farm, which is not connected to the cottage at all. They're separate properties, you see." Fairweather Farm had a large wooden creosoted brown gate, which was left wide open. They drove down a large asphalt road that had been recently paved and was pleasantly smooth under the wheels, and then they came to a cobbled road that veered off the main road with an arrow and sign which read Wisteria Cottage. "This must be it," said Steve, as they drove down a little road that finally led to the cottage. Jeanette held her breath, bracing herself for what they would see, as Alice had not been forthcoming about the condition of the cottage, and in her exuberance to book the haunted place, she had failed to ask about the most basic amenities the place actually offered. "Bloody hell," said Steve as he took one look at the cottage. "Did you see a brochure before you booked the place? It looks positively creepy." Jeanette smiled inwardly at Steve's startled reaction to the weekend rental, a private joke she wasn't going to share with him. By all accounts, he was absolutely right. There was something evocatively airy about the cottage that gave you a tingling, uneasy feeling, as if you were definitely being watched before you even entered the premises. This is what Jeanette had been hoping for, but the disquieted, fraught feeling the cottage exuded did cause her hair to stand on edge ever so slightly. "Well, we better make the most of it then, shall we?" said Jeanette. "We're here for the weekend, so we must enjoy ourselves. It's not often I get time off work, Steve." "You're right. The big plus is the countryside around here is breathtakingly beautiful." That certainly was one redeeming aspect to the somewhat uncongenial cottage that appeared almost hostile and unfriendly, as if someone or something was not altogether happy with the couple's fortuitous, unforeseen arrival. The cottage foundation seemed to melt into the flowering meadow with a seamless grace like white chocolate, as if it had always belonged to the landscape forever. The meadow merged into the field of sagebrush that was heavily flanked by an evergreen wooded area. "I'm looking forward to enjoying a walk in the woods," said Steve. "I can't remember the last time I've been into a woods." Jeanette opened the trunk. The couple brought out their overnight bags, along with their groceries, for the weekend in the cottage. Jeanette was pleasantly pleased to see that the cottage from the inside was well presented. The rooms blended seamlessly into each other. There were generous open marble fireplaces both in the living room area and the main bedroom. A delightful country kitchen fitted with soapstone countertops and backsplashes. There was a sizable Frankie stainless steel sink, with a zooty state-of-the-art tap. All of this was set off by very stylish-looking cream cabinetry, the pièce de résistance being a huge dark green range oven. Who would have thought that a haunted location like this would be made so sumptuously cosy? The sweeping oakwood staircase led to the upstairs bedrooms. They were well fitted with large queen-sized beds, with soft comfortable linens, Egyptian cottons and bright colourful scatter cushions, along with elegant furnishings, while the smooth off-white walls were carefully strewn with selective abstract art pieces, along with a series of bright cheerful-looking Picasso prints. Steve sighed with relief after he started unloading the groceries into the refrigerator. "Thank God this place isn't so menacing on the inside. It's actually quite cosy in here. I think we're going to enjoy ourselves very much." Before long, Jeanette and Steve settled into the cottage. Jeanette secretly began to feel a slight tingle of disappointment. The normality of everything, the smooth flow of the unpacking, the stocking of the fridge, the going for a brief walk outside, made her seriously begin to doubt that this was a haunted location at all. Her first impressions of the place being sinister had all but dissipated. But then, in truth, what was she expecting? Ghosts to come crawling out of the ceiling like spiders hanging on their ethereal silken webs? It didn't work like that. She began to secretly ponder whether Alice had made the entire thing up about the cottage being haunted, hyped everything up. A clever, intoxicating Machiavellian ruse, so that she'd bite the bait, be reeled in like a fish at the end of a line, and then book the cottage. It would make shrewd business sense, wouldn't it, to be as cunning as that? But then that couldn't be right, could it? Alice didn't know Jeanette was interested in ghosts. On the contrary, Jeanette had not even shared this secret fascination with anyone, so that didn't make any sense at all. The good news, though, was when she returned from a walk with Steve, one glance at the outside of the cottage, the tangled wisteria, the dark tenebrous windows, the portentous grey shadows dancing across the wall, the feeling of being watched all over again by uncongenial eyes, the baleful impression once again reignited, illuminating those inauspicious, unfavourable feelings like the wick on a candle. That evening the cottage felt uncommonly cold, which was rather surprising, but it was nothing that a warm fire wouldn't fix, and so before long a glorious fire was burning away happily in the hearth, where the bright orange flames crackled, spit, hissed and curled. Steve and Jeanette sat happily around the fire, drinking long cold glasses of Sauvignon Blanc, and talking together. Jeanette stared at the flames of the fire, as though momentary transfixed by them, when suddenly the couple heard a thumping noise, as if something very hard had been flung down the staircase with an almighty thunderous crash. "What the hell is that?" said Steve. Then they heard another thud, and another one. They ran over to the staircase and found 3 books lying split open at the bottom of the stairs. "How the hell did that happen?" said Steve, rushing up the staircase to check if someone was in the house and playing a practical joke on them. "I mean, books don't go flying downstairs by themselves, do they?" Jeanette's heart leapt with excitement. This was the first sign, she thought, that maybe we're not alone after all. She reached for the first book lying on the terracotta floor, a novel. She read the first line of the words on the page. The sentence read, "The people were advised it was in their best interest to leave." She picked up the second book, and the sentence read, "I'd advise you to go now," Lacey told the butler, "if you know what's good for you." Third book, first sentence read, "I'm warning you to go. This is your last chance. Go before it's too late." Jeanette closed the books, wondering if it was a coincidence that all the books somehow contained cryptic messages. Were they inadvertently being told by some invisible entity to leave? Steve came down the staircase, and Jeanette noticed he seemed disturbed. He was running his hands through his blonde hair in a gesture he only did when he was rather nervous. He picked up the bottom of the wine that he'd been drinking to study its alcoholic content and asked Jeanette how much wine they'd had to drink. Jeanette looked at Steve with a puzzled expression on her face. "Why, we've only had about 1.5 glasses. You look whiter than a sheet. Did you find anything up there? Is there any explanation as to why those books just threw themselves down the stairs?" Steve did not appear to be listening to Jeanette, but began to pace up and down the living room like a restless lion in a zoo enclosure. "I'm just wondering if I'm seeing things. I could have sworn when I went upstairs. I entered the upstairs spare bedroom. I saw a young man in a plaid shirt.
He was smoking. He looked up at me and smirked. Then he was just gone like that."
Jeanette grew excited. "Where did you see him?"
"I'm not saying I saw anything at all," said Steve. "It's what I thought I saw. I think the wine has gone straight to my head. I've clearly been hallucinating, seeing things that aren't actually there. But for a moment, Jeanette, it seemed so startlingly real. I really think that wine has gone to my head."
"Show me where this happened," said Jeanette, following Steve eagerly up the stairs to the smaller bedroom. They entered the bedroom and Jeanette sniffed the air. "That's strange. I smell cigarette smoke in here," she said. "Can you smell it?"
"I do. It's very strong."
She walked over to the bay window to open it, to invite some fresh air to enter the room. "Ah, that's better." "Look," she said, pointing to the bed, where a large indentation had made a huge hollow in the end of the bedspread, as if someone had been sitting there. Steve's face grew grave.
"I wasn't imagining what I saw then. Someone was in here."
He began to quickly search around the house, but there was no sign of anyone at all.
"Can you believe the blatant audacity of it? Someone must have slipped in when we were sitting by the fire. I mean, let's face it, we never locked the front door. It must have been the young man who threw the books down the stairs to scare us half to death. But he has well and truly gone now. What a bloody cheek. I mean, who does that? Breaks into a cottage, has a smoke at the end of a bed, throws a few books down the staircase."
Jeanette was not sure what Steve had seen, but she was certain whatever it wasn't of this world, but she wasn't about to tell him that. Sadly for Jeanette, it was a pedestrian, unexceptional evening after the initial excitement. Things remained commonplace and uneventful. Chris felt secure that the cottage was now safely locked, so no intruders could enter the premises, but he put his revolver close to his bedside drawer to feel secure, which was out of character for him to do, which meant, as far as Jeanette was concerned, he must have taken quite a scare earlier on. But if he'd been left feeling slightly unhinged, he was admitting to nothing, which was typical of Chris, who was good at acting nonchalant when his feathers had been clearly ruffled. Jeanette climbed into bed, pulling the covers over her body, switching off her bedside light. "Night, Chris," she said. "Night," came his reply. Jeanette woke feeling very cold. The whole bedroom felt as if the punnelling Arctic winds of Siberia had hit the room so fiercely hard that she went to the cupboard to retrieve some warm blankets. When she returned to her bed and threw a blanket over the sheets, she decided to glance out of the window. Why she chose to do this, she had no idea. It was dark outside, but soft shadows of moonlight danced across the exterior of the cottage. In the meadow she could swear she had seen a dark silhouette moving through the grass. It looked like a shadow person, thought Jeanette, finding herself growing increasingly excited. She had heard about shadow people before, but had never encountered one. This was a moment not to be missed. With her heart thumping wildly, she threw on some sneakers, grabbed a head torch, and tiptoed down the staircase in her blue pinstripe pyjamas, opening the front door and undoing the latch. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find that it wasn't that cold outside. So why did the inside of the house feel like an icebox, she wondered. There was a gentle, cool, bracing, delicious breeze blowing against her face. She felt invigorated as she ran through the long grass of the meadow, through the field of sagebrush, towards the wood grove. Jeanette had never been a fearful person. All her life she'd been hardwired to embrace adventure. She was naturally inquisitive by nature. She wasn't prepared to sit back, wondering what it was she'd seen. That would mean all her life she'd be pondering, what was the strange shadow figure I saw out of the window all those years ago? So she was intent on finding out the answer to that question. And there was no time like the present. Steve was always complaining that she was far too impulsive for her own good, but Jeanette did not agree. She believed in seizing the moment. That was all that life was about, and this night was no exception to that golden rule. The ethereal luminescent half-moon, along with the light of her headlamp, provided Jeanette with just enough light to see where she was going. She was now certain that the large shadow of black had disappeared into the woodgrove. She had seen it all too briefly, if only for a second. Her heart thundered excitedly as she neared her approach, grateful that whatever this black shadow being was, she now was seeing it, and it was moving very slowly, almost as if it was floating on air. It had to be a ghostly being, she thought.
The gloriously magnificent ponderosa pines and Douglas fir trees swept up into the sky masterfully like graceful perpendicular towers, their needled offshoots jiggling ever so slightly in the breeze, almost as if they were dancing. Jeanette moved cautiously behind one tree after another, with a military precision that would certainly have impressed an army general, taking great care to remain very quiet. That was when she saw the black shadow being all over again. Its back was turned away from her, but the humanoid silhouette was gargantuan in size, dense and burly. This ghost-like spectral being looked like the Incredible Hulk, only it appeared to be covered with hair. It was when it began to grunt and breathe deeply like a horse that Jeanette began to realise that this creature was possibly not a ghost at all. It seemed real. All of a sudden Jeanette coughed very loudly. Where the heck did that come from, she wondered. The creature turned around swiftly at the sound of Jeanette's cough. It became as alert as a guard dog, almost as if its ears had perked up, as if every hair on its body was standing up in attention. It was when the creature turned around and Jeanette saw it clearly that she knew instinctively what it was. The creature she thought was a black shadow being was in fact a Bigfoot. Before she could process what she'd actually observed, the Bigfoot was now looking directly at her, standing only yards away from her. Jeanette froze to the spot. Her legs wobbled beneath her like unstable camping chairs. Her knees buckled. Oh my God, she wondered, was this great big hairy monster going to kill her? It would seem the blood drained from her face as she stared back at the creature, surprised to see that at such close proximity the creature had a human-like face and deep-set dark eyes that were not uncongenial. On the contrary, they seemed rather amused. The creature then coughed like Jeanette had done, as if to say, "Look, I can cough the same as you." Then Jeanette coughed back, and the creature also coughed. Then Jeanette giggled, and so did the creature. As weird as it sounds, it was an unlikely interaction between a human and a Bigfoot. It was what Jeanette would describe later as the coughing game. Jeanette made all kinds of strange coughs. The creature emulated her vast range of coughs. The coughing morphed into other sounds that Jeanette made, like the sound of a dog barking. But the creature made Jeanette's attempts at copying a dog bark seem almost pathetic, as he recreated the noise to perfection, sounding exactly like a dog. It was clear that this was not the first time the creature had emulated a dog bark, nor would it be the last. He also made other impressive sounds for Jeanette to reproduce, which she could not mirror very well, like the hoot of an owl and the howl of a coyote. Her measly attempts at howling made the creature chuckle in his throat, the sound rather reminding her of a deep cat purr. Both Jeanette and the creature had formed an unlikely friendship over this rather bizarre interaction of imitating familiar sounds from the natural world. Finally, she pointed to herself and said, "Jeanette." The creature tried to echo her name, failing miserably at first, and then he said it to perfection. Only the net at the end of her name, the Bigfoot pronounced as nit, Janit. The creature reached out to Jeanette's shoulder, patting her with his very large human hand, almost as if he was tapping her. Jeanette believed it was his way of saying, "It was good to meet you." Then he nodded at Jeanette with his pyramid-shaped head, looking intently into her eyes, as if to say, "I really need to go." She watched in awe as it glided away, swinging its arms backwards and forwards, so incredibly gracefully, moving with an efficiency that just defied belief. 5-foot strides at the very least. She secretly marvelled how ghost-like he appeared. No wonder she had perceived him to be a shadow being. He looked exactly like that. Once the Bigfoot had glided away, the reality of what had transpired hit Jeanette like a brick to the head. "Oh my God," she thought, "I've just seen a Bigfoot, and it interacted with me. It was friendly." She couldn't wait to tell Steve about the miraculous encounter that had just transpired, and eagerly raced back to the cottage, feeling like a euphoric kid running out of the woodgrove into the meadow at a crazy speed, her heart just bouncing buoyantly with a joy she could not describe. Finally she opened the door of the cottage, scrambling inside, only to be greeted by Steve standing in the doorway, looking overwrought. "Where have you been?" he demanded, in a fractious tone that punctured the joy in Jeanette's heart instantly, like a deflating beach ball. I thought I heard a noise outside, Jeanette lied. I went outside just, to see what it was. Something terrible happened in the bedroom, Jeanette, when you were gone. What? Asked Jeanette. She could see by the expression on Steve's face that something had scared the living daylights out of him. She'd never seen him look so fearful in her life before. His eyes seemed round, almost glazed over, in a delirious confusion. I woke up. I saw you weren't in your bed. But I heard these combat boots. They were thumping around the bedroom, vibrating across the floorboards. Walking, Jeanette, walking to my side of the bed. The thing, whatever it was, it stood there. And then something grabbed me. It started to choke me. It was on top of my body, Jeanette, holding me down. I could feel hands around my neck. I couldn't breathe, Jeanette. I was fighting back with all my might, but there was nothing there, but I could feel him. He was real. The colour drained from Jeanette's face. Something tried to strangle you? Oh, my God! That's terrible. Steve nodded. I could feel the anger and hatred, Jeanette. It smelt very strongly of cigarette smoke. Whatever it was, Jeanette, it wanted me dead. I know it did. I never expected that to happen here, said Jeanette. Not something like this. Of course you didn't expect this to happen, Jeanette. You do say the oddest things sometimes. You know what I'm thinking, Jeanette? I know this is going to sound far-fetched and irrational, but I think the man I thought I saw smoking at the end of the bed, I think he was a ghost. I think he tried to kill me. I really do, because I told you I could smell his breath and it reeked of cigarettes. This place, Jeanette, it's haunted. I thought you didn't believe in stuff like that, Steve. Well, I do now. I'll tell you something for nothing, Jeanette. I'm not staying here 1 minute longer. We're leaving now. I know it's dark outside, but I can't risk being attacked by that thing again. Whatever it was, it doesn't want us here. Jeanette thought about the books that had fallen down the stairs and the cryptic messages almost telling them to leave, so she nodded her head. You're probably right. They gathered all their belongings together as quickly as possible and locked the front door behind them when Jeanette said, Oh, I remember I left my watch hanging on the towel rail in the bathroom. I better quickly go and get it. You what? You did what? I was having a shower. I realised my watch was on my wrist, so I put it on the towel rail. I need to get it back now. Jeanette hurriedly entered the cottage for one last time, dashing up the sweeping staircase and running down the upstairs passageway, which led to the bedroom and ensuite bathroom. She could see her gold watch dangling on the towel rail. She grabbed it and put it on her wrist. As she was about to go down the staircase, she was certain she could smell cigarette smoke. On instinct, she opened the door of the spare bedroom. There she saw a young man in a blue plaid shirt, wearing a blue bandana, smoking a cigarette. But this man was definitely a ghost, although for a moment he looked very solid and lifelike as a human being would. He looked up at her, gave her a big smirk, and Jeanette quickly closed the door as fast as she possibly could, running down the staircase in her haste, nearly tripping over herself in the process, her heart thundering through her chest. She could hear combat boots running behind her down the staircase, but she saw nothing. She quickly climbed in the truck to sit beside Steve. She shouted, What are you waiting for? Get going! Jeanette looked back at the cottage briefly. The door that she'd slammed behind her so that it naturally locked was now wide open. A figure was standing there. Go! She screamed. Go! Once they'd reached the interstate, Jeanette sighed with relief, as she and Steve had evaded a major attack. Whatever was in that cottage wasn't good. It wanted her and Steve out. Sagaciously, she decided she was not going to confess to booking into a haunted cottage for the weekend, or about her anomalous encounter with a Bigfoot to Steve. There were some things best left unsaid. Steve had been in the eye of the storm, with the supernatural, so to speak. It was up to him to decide whether ghosts were real or not. From Jeanette's perspective, she knew without a doubt that our soul lives on, for the ghost she had seen in that bedroom had physically acknowledged her with that nasty smirk. It wasn't like a photograph on the fabric of time, or some kind of impression like that. This had definitely been a brief interaction with a ghost, whom had clearly acknowledged her presence as much as she had acknowledged his. To cut a long story short, Jeanette phoned Alice to ask what she had failed to ask before. "Who is haunting your cottage?" she asked the girl. "What's the story connected to the place?" "Well, the cottage is supposed to be haunted by 2 ghosts, I gather. One's a young man who died in the 70s. He lived in that cottage with his parents and OD'd on drugs. I gather his mother found him lying deceased in his bedroom. By all accounts, he's a rather insidious character. Many people claim to smell him smoking cigarettes, or to have heard a man's raspy voice screaming in their ear to get out. He doesn't like people being around. He sometimes tries to push people down the stairs. The other ghost is of an old woman who lived in the cottage over 100 years ago. She's been seen around the place, but I think even she's bullied away by the young man." Jeanette thanked Alice for the privilege of staying in her cottage, but one thing was for certain: she wouldn't be going back there in a hurry. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.